Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to day two. My name is Sam Dawes. I was an aide to Kofi Annan for 3 years, from 2000 to 2003, so I'm really delighted to be here. A reminder that this conference is on the record and is being live streamed worldwide, so please put your phone on silent. We have a really exceptional session this morning, which will reflect on the legacy of Kofi Annan and the creation of the Millennium Development Goals, as well as the prospects for the 2030 agenda. And the power of setting clear, unambiguous targets to focus attention and to galvanize resources was a really important legacy that Kofi Annan left and that Mark Mallet-Brown made a huge contribution to back in 2000. Kofi Annan identified the education of girls and the empowerment of women as key to realizing the MDGs as a whole. So this panel will consider what's the best similar multiplier today. Is it the data revolution? Is it building accountable, inclusive institutions? Is it unlocking private finance? Is it the leave no one behind human rights framing, or all of the above? Or is it back to basics, health, education, and gender equality first? Before I turn to our panel, we have the great privilege and pleasure today to hear the UN Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed. I had the opportunity to get to know Amina over the course of an intensive year of post-2015 high-level panel meetings in London, Liberia, Indonesia, and New York. And two things stood out for me from that experience. Amina then was the special advisor to Ban Ki-moon on the Sustainable Development Goals. The first was her steely determination and skill in aligning the disparate and often competing UN bodies, funds, programs, and departments into a unified UN approach, which is really a herding cats exercise, and Amina was remarkable in it. But secondly was her passion and commitment to doing the right thing, to navigating what I think is one of the most difficult terrains of member state politics the UN has experienced, and always keeping the big picture in mind, a universal endorsement of a new ambitious and universal sustainable development agenda. And since serving as a key architect of the SDGs, Amina, as Deputy Secretary General, has become a relentless advocate for their realization. So enthusiastic that she's actually broken her foot in the process of carrying out her duties. And I would like now to all of us to warmly invite the Deputy Secretary General to deliver some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Sam. It was kicking reform and it kicked back. So we're trying to, but anyway, colleagues, friends, and our distinguished panelists, most especially Kojo, Amma, Shanti, it's wonderful to see you again. Let me start by thanking Chatham House for bringing us together again, a legacy of our beloved mentor and former Secretary General Kofi Annan. Last night's public event, for me, was deeply moving and showed again the breadth of Kofi's impact across all our lives, but especially the world. Today, we continue the conversation, but with a particular focus. Let me start with a bit of the broad context, especially as we look at a critical moment in our history. By some important measures, and I think Bill Gates has said this over and over again, Mark, rising life expectancy, the declining incidence of war, the expanding ranks of our global middle class, human well-being, all continues to improve. And this is contrary to popular belief and certainly to the headlines that we see today. So it isn't all doom and gloom. However, having said that, 2019, we still face some really strong headwinds: rising inequality, intolerance that's spreading like wildfire, and the deepening impacts of the climate crisis, which has become an existential threat to all of us. We see growing anxiety and frustration amongst young people, mental health on the rise, and among poor and marginalized communities, as well as fraying social cohesion, plunging confidence in institutions and political establishments. Globalization has yet to be perceived as fair or even advantageous. In reality, it has been exclusive for a few and often exploited on the backs of the poor. The solidarity expressed in our United Nations Charter, the opening words of "We the People," is critical for our humanity's future. The values that are enshrined throughout the document must remain at the core and continue to be our compass. And the development vision articulated in the UN has never been more important and needed in our world today. The 2030 Agenda really has come at a right time. Friends, one might say that Kofi had a plan to bring these values and visions to life. The Millennium Development Goals, the central plank of his legacy, spawned tremendous progress. It showed how goals really could galvanize people into action. The numbers of people living on less than $1.25 a day was reduced from 1.9 billion in 1990 to 836 million in 2015. This was the largest decline of its kind in human history. And quite apart from the improvements in individual lives, we were all emboldened by the clear proof that such gains are possible and solidarity for our human values very much alive. Yet much remained to be done to ensure that we have a life of dignity for everyone. With the unfinished business of the MDG era in mind, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and our 17 goals have become our new rallying point. And today we've got many, many useful lessons in hand. First, that we've seen the importance and the centrality of inclusion and strong institutions. Second, the value of national and local ownership. And third, the power of partnerships, especially with the business community. Kofi Annan was the first Secretary General who sought to harness the full capacities of the private sector to advance the work of the creation of the UN. He was convinced that governments alone cannot do everything. And I would say today they shouldn't do everything. They're not wired up to do so. And so he altered the tenor and the very basis of the UN-business relationship. Where once those ties were often adversarial, Kofi sought to create space for business to do its best while benefiting society at the same time. And he did so through an emphasis not on codes of conduct, but rather a shared principle: human rights, labor rights, environmental stewardship, and anti-corruption. The creation of the Global Compact Corporate Citizenship and Sustainability Initiative has profoundly changed the dynamics between the UN and the private sector. And businesses, with their remarkable expertise, technology, and financial resources, have started to be seen and accepted as agents of change for sustainable development. And many, like Paul Pullman, championing the change of their business models to embrace sustainable development. Business themselves came to see that their enterprises could best flourish through the market-friendly success of the UN's work on peace, stability, and resilience. Responsible business providing lasting foundations for sustainable development. This may actually be a somewhat overlooked past of Annan's legacy, but he brought us to where we are today, a time when multi-stakeholder partnerships are recognized and promoted to spur implementation of the SDGs. It is a legacy of global governance anchored in both global solidarity and a shared responsibility. Friends, today we need to build on this achievement and to do so with a great urgency. Whether looking at the latest reports on biodiversity, climate change, or the SDGs, the message is unanimous. We are not moving fast enough to provide for people or to protect our home, the planet. On some goals, we're even seeing regression. Mostly, we're flatlining. Without deep transformation, we do risk catastrophic climate change, the mass extinction of ecosystems and species, even higher levels of forced displacement of our people, and a major rollback of decades of development progress, and all of the political turmoil that accompanies social and economic disruption. We need to shift the world, I believe, onto a trajectory that is compatible with the 2030 Agenda. It took us 4 years to shape that. It was a collective effort. The United Nations stretched to that ambition because it reached out and brought you in. And that would lead us, I believe, to a much more fair globalization. This September, we're trying to generate a high-level political moment to do just that. Through the SDG Summit that does the first stock-taking since we signed on to the SDGs, the Climate Action Summit that does need to take action at the highest levels with the highest possible ambition, and dedicated meetings on health, finance, and small island development states. What we want our political leaders to do and our global partners is to signal that they have heard the alarm and that are intent on taking the kind of ambitious decisions and actions that will make the SDGs' success a possibility once again. Whether in terms of carbon emissions, land use, renewable energy, the global food system, social protection, our institutions, the delivery of healthcare, education, investing in skills for the future, we want to see leadership and we want to see ambition urgently. Thereafter, we will be calling on our partners to get behind a global call to a decade of action over the course of 2020 to 2030. This will allow us to change course, to realign, to reposition, to get the world back on track, and to get ready for a truly groundbreaking, transformative decade of action and delivery. Not just the promises that we made in 2015, but to achieve what was intended in 1945 and what Kofi himself worked so hard to advance: peace, justice, and prosperity for all on a healthy and a thriving planet. I know that you'll all be with us, and what I hope that we will do, and I'm going to quote from the Pope again, let us turn a world of globalized indifference into one of global solidarity. Eid Mubarak, and thank you. We do have the can-do spirit.